Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Signal's Top 10. I am Genevieve Wood, and we are here to break down the top news stories of the week, many of which have gone underreported, or I should say misreported, by the mainstream media. And joining me to break it all down is Daily Signal senior contributor Jarrett Stepman and our social media manager, Lindsay Fifield. Okay, let's start up first with heroes of the Las Vegas shooting.
Just feeling that impact. I think I was just shot. It felt like a huge baseball, just the force of it going through my stomach. And if it wasn't for that cab driver, I wouldn't be here. And I don't know who he is.
We had to climb over a fence to get out, and people were trampling over each other. And it was pretty much a war zone.
We can just hear people screaming, asking for help, but we decided just to help this one individual. By the fourth time I got up to do chest compressions with my arms locked. That's when I got hit in the arm.
The closest hospital I think was Sunrise, and he didn't take me there because he knew that he didn't think I would make it. So he's like, no, I have to take you to the trauma hospital. He's all, you'll be treated right away. And, are you going to be okay? I said, I'll be okay. Just please get me there.
So, senior contributor, Jarrett Stepman, really moving testimonies here.
Yeah, this is something that, I like to see. I mean, we saw this horrible monster committed these acts of mass murder, these acts of evil, but really seeing Americans en masse there in Las Vegas react. And there were some absolute heroes at this time, people who snapped into reaction mode, protecting other people. There's these great stories of people who just like that, men on a battlefield saying, hey, we got to do something to protect our fellow citizens. I mean, yeah. I have to say, this really is what America's about. It's not about these monsters who shoot people and gun them down. It's about also the people who reacted after, the people of Las Vegas standing in line for hours to donate blood. I mean, that is civil society. That is where America's at its best. And it really is, such a horrible incident. To see Americans react in that way is really a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the story of the Marine who stole a truck, and people were saying, oh, he stole it. I'm sorry, but if something bad like that's happening, of course you're going to do whatever you can, and that's perfectly legal, actually. It's not considered stealing. It's actually just the right thing to do. You do what you can to help your fellow man. If that means taking a boat or a truck or something, whatever you have to get people to the hospital, he did the right thing, and I think he saved a lot of lives by doing it. Indeed.
Well, we're probably going to hear more and more of these kind of stories as the days go ahead. But, of course, it didn't take long for all this to also turn into politics. And Jimmy Kimmel, late-night comedian, took a stab at it. Here you go.
But we don't, which is interesting because when someone with a beard attacks us, we tap phones, we invoke travel bans, we build walls, we take every possible precaution to make sure it doesn't happen again. But when an American buys a gun and kills other Americans, then there's nothing we can do about that. And Second Amendment, I guess, our forefathers wanted us to have AK-47s. Is the argument, I assume. Orlando, Newtown, Aurora, San Bernardino, every one of these shootings, the murder used automatic or semi-automatic rifles, which are not weapons you use for self-defense.
So, obviously very moved by what happened, as many people were, but had to turn it in also to a diatribe on guns and gun policy.
I mean, we saw this right after this thing. I mean, things were still clearing up in the day after, and it turned to politics right away. And we're kind of used to seeing this now from Jimmy Kimmel. He's kind of replaced, years ago it was Jon Stewart. There was, of course, the liberal conscience on every issue. And now it's kind of Jimmy Kimmel. He'll step into every one of these issues with this emotion. Look, I believe the guy is very genuine in his beliefs. I know that a lot of liberals, they believe these things about gun control. They're upset about these incidents. They say, why aren't we doing something? But to a certain extent, there's a lot of misinformation about guns that's out there, and Kimmel has played into some of that and kind of emotionalized this issue at an emotional time. I think people are a little tired of seeing this from our celebrities and people who, frankly, they don't know much about gun policy or these things and saying, well, we need to take action right now.
Right.
I think they should stick to comedy and late night stuff rather than stepping into every single political issue.
Well, I think, and you're right, he is sincere. Absolutely. Anybody who watches these monologues from him can tell that he absolutely believes what he's saying, but he's being misled by people like Chuck Schumer, who have come out and said, yeah, we gave him these talking points. And so he's being actively misled by people on the left to believe these things about, be it healthcare, gun control. And I think that's the unfortunate thing here, is that they're actually taking advantage of a Hollywood celebrity who has had Republicans on. He had someone on his show talking about Obamacare, and then, was coached to say, oh, never mind, this person was being misleading. Well, that's not true.
Yeah, but he was willingly misled, right?
Exactly.
And as we all know, as many times you hear these hard cases makes for bad law, and terrible situations like this one, the stories like this, often make for terrible policy. That happens when you have people wanting to do something, but not necessarily knowing the right thing to do. All right, let's continue on this line of thinking here by going to none other than Harvard University, where we have a professor there, a religious professor no less, calling the NRA a domestic terrorist organization.
It's time to stop with the excuses. We have to have the courage to call the NRA exactly what it has become: a domestic terrorist organization that places profit above the lives of the American people.
Lindsay, reaction?
Wow. So here's the thing about the NRA, and I am an NRA member, I should disclose, but NRA is the oldest and largest civil rights organization in this country. In the 1960s, they were training African Americans on how to protect themselves from the Klan. These are not, it's absolutely ridiculous that they would come out and say that the NRA supports terrorism, or that they in any way, were okay with what happened in Las Vegas. They came out with a statement denouncing, obviously, what happened, because this is not what law-abiding gun owners in this country are all about. They're all about safety and training and making sure that we protect our Second Amendment freedoms. And this has nothing to do with, how could you say that they're a domestic terror organization with any seriousness?
Yeah, I mean, I think this shows the hyperbole and overreaction in the days after this. The left attacks anybody who disagrees with them, with their line about gun control and gun rights. And look, I mean, when they attack the NRA and call them a domestic terrorist organization, they're attacking a lot of Americans who simply don't believe that gun control is the answer to these problems.
And a lot of Democrats.
A lot of Democrats.
The NRA has a lot of Democratic members too.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think when you hear people like this attacking the NRA, I think it tunes people off to their message, saying, well, look, I believe in gun rights. I think what happened in Las Vegas was terrible, but I don't want to go right now and start taking away these rights from Americans. I don't think that gun control is the answer. I'm not a domestic terrorist. I'm a good, decent American who, maybe registered with the NRA. So I think this turns off a lot of people to their message, saying, well, everybody who disagrees with me is some kind of inhuman monster.
It's crazy.
All right, let's turn towards the entertainment world. And lost a big performer this week. Tom Petty, rock star, died at the age of 66.
Tom Petty's music embodied the essence of rock and roll: freedom, truth, and rebellion. With a career that spanned more than half a century, Petty was hailed by some as a musical poet.
Music, as far as I've seen in the world so far, is the only real magic that I know.
I was just sharing with these guys, I worked for NBC a few years ago, and in 1994, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers played on Saturday Night Live, and I was the page standing right off to the side.
Oh, remember?
I mean, like they had just released one of their greatest hits albums. No, they'd recently released the album that had probably their most recent big hits, if you will. And oh gosh, now of course I can't name them all. But I just remember everybody in the crowd, regardless of age, was really into it and knew his music. You could be in your 60s, or you could be, at that time 20 years old and really be into it.
This is what I loved. I think it was the 2007 Super Bowl, which I thought was the best halftime show, where they brought Tom Petty, and I thought it was so great. I mean, a lot of the other halftime shows were bad or they've been divisive, but this was just it was the best one. It was good music. everybody liked it. It seemed
Entertaining.
Entertaining.
It was all about the light show.
It wasn't about the light show. It was
Razzmatazz.
about the music that everybody enjoyed. And so, it's
before everything was politicized.
Before
the
everything.
good old days of 2007. No, it is so heartbreaking that he died so young, though. But you look at it. I mean, he had drug problems throughout his whole life. He did recover. In the past few years, he has recovered, and he's been in I don't know what you call it, but he's been in recovery. But it just goes to show, don't do drugs because it catches up with you eventually. And I don't think that he would have passed away at such a young age if he hadn't had such problems early in his life.
Free Falling, was that the?
That was it.
The one? Free Falling.
I knew it was going to come
Classic.
to me eventually.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to number 6. We're going to bring it back to Washington now. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. Well, he didn't say what everybody thought he was going to say, and he called the media out. Take a look.
Well, I'm new to Washington. I have learned that there are some who try to sow dissension to advance their own agenda by tearing others apart in an effort to undermine President Trump's own agenda. I do not, and I will not operate that way. And the same applies to everyone on my team here at the State Department.
Lindsay, I don't know how many emails I got before he made his statement saying he's going to resign.
Right?
He's going to
Of course.
resign.
Well, and the lefties on Twitter, which I monitor all day long, all the journalists were just chattering like, oh, it's going to happen. I loved, this was such a brilliant move that he came out, and I think it was intentional. I think he came out with that like pregnant expectation of like, what's he gonna do? And then he came out and it was just such a spanking to the left that he was like, I'm not resigning. And I loved his line, this is petty nonsense. And it is, it was petty nonsense that this story came out of nowhere. The left literally, in the media just fabricated this story that Tillerson and Trump are like at each other's throats. It's just not based in fact. And I loved that he came out and said, this is ridiculous. We're draining, this is part of the swamp that we're draining is putting these stories to rest because they're dumb.
Yeah, Jared, do you think that this will put an end to it?
No, I don't. Unfortunately, the media tends to grab onto the most useless stories that most Americans do not care about.
If anything, it's going to make them more likely. But then who's going to be listening to the media because they're going to see like, oh, they just made this story up.
Indeed. Okay, so we'll continue to follow. But you're right. It was a fun thing to watch because it wasn't what people were expecting.
Exactly.
All right. As many of you know, it's Columbus Day weekend celebrating Christopher Columbus.
Yes.
But there's a Columbus statue that is under fire. Well, there's many Christopher Columbus statues. And they're having to put up security for these statues now.
Yeah.
I used to live close to the Christopher Columbus statue in New York. Lovely little area there now. But they're having to protect them because some of the same folks who want to take down Confederate statues now want to take down basically every statue.
Yeah, it's incredible. This particular statue was actually put on this commission that Mayor Bill de Blasio has to review statues that may be offensive. And to a certain extent, I think that puts a target on these statues and monuments. Some people say, well, we're going to go after if we can't bring it down legally, we're going to bring it down through vandalism. And that's that has definitely happened. I went to Baltimore and saw a Columbus statue that was badly defaced, and I have to say I'm worried for this Columbus Day that there are going to be groups, maybe Antifa groups or far left groups that say, hey, we're just going to take the law into our own hands. We're going to break these oftentimes 100-year-old statues, a tribute to Christopher Columbus, and smash them and bring them down. So I think this is a really sad moment that we have to worry about protecting statues and inanimate objects from mobs, essentially, who want to attack them. It would be really tragic, especially this Columbus statue in New York, if something were to happen, because it's a work of art, frankly.
Well, it's good that it's on, as you know, because you've seen it before. It's up on a huge pedestal, thank goodness. But it's ridiculous, but I'm glad that they're finally actually protecting these statues, because the one in Baltimore should have been protected. Local authorities should have known that these things are targets now, and I'm glad to see New York stepping up and actually taking some action to protect them. But I think it's just sad. I mean, Columbus Day, we've celebrated it forever. I'm Catholic. And I think a lot of these anti-Catholic groups are the ones that have actually disseminated these talking points that are and it's kind of ironic to see people gravitating towards these misleading things. Well, but they think he came because, that was the beginning of destroying, the Native American culture and population. Which is just not true. It's not based in historical fact. That those were things that were actually made up by the KKK and by anti-Catholic and anti-Italian groups. They made up stories about Columbus that now Antifa and the left are lapping up and using. So it's kind of ironic that you see Antifa using KKK talking points to talk about Columbus.
Oh, we need some good history lessons out there. don't we?
We really do.
But before we do that, let's move to football.
Yay!
But not about generally
Finally.
the NFL. We're moving to an NFL quarterback. Carolina quarterback Cam Newton has lost a sponsor because he laughed at a female reporter's question. Take a look.
A lot of pride in seeing your receivers play well. Devin Funchess has seemed to really embrace the physicality of his routes and getting those extra yards. Does that give you a little bit of an enjoyment to see him kind of truck sticking people out there?
It's funny to hear a female talk about routes. Like, it's funny.
After careful thought, I understand that my word choice was extremely degrading and disrespectful to women. And to be honest, that was not my intentions. And if you are a person who took offense to what I said, I sincerely apologize to you.
Okay, maybe I should have been offended by this. I'm a woman. I like sports in my other life. I'm going to be a sports reporter. But I wasn't offended.
No.
I just kind of thought it was a natural moment.
I mean,
moved on.
I have to give full disclosure. I graduated from Auburn and Montgomery, War Eagle, love Cam Newton. But I wasn't offended by this either. Not because I love Cam, but I just thought that he was trying to be funny and the joke just fell flat. And I think that his apology kind of looked like one of those like hostage situations where he was like, oh crap, the leftist mob has come for me and now I must apologize. And so it's really sad to see this happen. It was so weird. And to see his sponsor drop him so quickly, it was like an hour after it happened. They were like, no, we don't want anything to do with this.
Yeah, it just shows how quickly people are scared of the left, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's the reason the sponsor dropped. Don't even give him a chance to apologize.
No.
Don't give him a chance to make amends or whatever. They just immediately drop.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the NFL is so afraid of this kind of stuff. I mean, they're afraid that
And they're scared of their own shadow, and now but they ought to be scared of the fans.
Yeah.
They should be, and they should be. I think fans are a little tired of any of this kind of stuff. And they're tired of, like, they just want to see football. You know, they just want to watch these games, and this is what we get all the time, 24/7, when it comes to the National Football League. And I think people are just sick of it. I think that's why a lot of people just say, well, you know, I'm going to tune out. I'm just tired of this.
Totally. And if you actually look at the responses to Cam's tweets and if you look at the responses to the journalist tweets, it seemed like a majority of people were actually on Cam's side, even women saying like, okay, that was weird. Thanks for apologizing. That was a really weird comment to make. But, you know, move on. And so I think it's weird that people think that, you know, they have to respond this way.
And we maybe have too high expectations of a guy who's a professional football player.
Look
and,
at
you know,
other NFL players.
Right, I mean, it's like, you know, we have too high expectations. I mean, this guy's not some kind of social commentator. He's a football player, and he's asked a question. You know, he flubbed it. You know, people need to calm down on this kind of stuff. This is kind of a part of the permanent outrage culture when it comes to these issues.
Well, and the NFL ratings continue to
plummet
down. All right, number 3, back to Washington. Micah's law passes in the House. It now moves to the Senate. Take a look.
The construct of this bill is that at 20 weeks, the child is capable of feeling excruciating pain. Operations are routinely performed on unborn children at 20 weeks. And the medical practice, the standard medical practice, is to provide anesthesia to the unborn child because they feel pain in the process of trying to save the child's life.
So, passes in the House. Lindsay, you don't have high hopes for the Senate.
I don't know. I mean, this is passed in the House. This is the 3rd time that this is passed in the House, and it hasn't been sent to the Senate. President Trump says that he will sign this bill if it's sent to his desk. So, hopefully it will go to the Senate. This is also not an extreme bill. This is actually a really reasonable bill. A lot of women in this country, even who consider themselves pro-choice, say, well, actually, 20 weeks is a pretty reasonable place to draw the line. We're one of only 5 countries in the whole world, including North Korea and China, that allow abortion.
It's not a great company that we're in amongst other countries.
It's ridiculous. And there are also call-outs in this bill for rape, incest, and life of the mother, or if the life of the mother is in danger. So this is a extremely reasonable piece of legislation. I don't think that there should be any reason it wouldn't pass the Senate, but I don't know if we'll have the 60 votes necessary to pass it. That's
there ought
the
to be
problem.
some Democrats, so like Senator West Virginia and others that would likely
because
come
it's
along,
reasonable,
but you might lose
you have these
Susan
leftist
Collins and
groups.
these folks.
You have a lot of these leftist groups coming out already mobilizing it, and the talking points about them are just absurd. They say that it's a junk science bill, that these babies don't feel pain. I'm sorry, but there are doctors who perform fetal surgery, and every time they perform these fetal surgeries, they provide anesthesia, and doctors are not
Because
anti-science.
they know
the babies feel pain. So it's crazy that they would say that we're the ones who believe in junk science when we're looking at the science. And the science says they physically feel pain at this time in their development.
I mean, it shows also, I mean, frankly, the Democrat Party, even those who
Yeah.
may personally lean pro-life, have such intense pressure from activist pro-choice groups that they're afraid to make a stand on these kind of issues. Even a bill that's quite reasonable. I mean, they always point to Europe, you know, oh, Europe is very liberal and socialist. In most of Europe, these laws are already in place. This is not legal to do these kind of things. So that kind of shows how extreme some of these groups have become in this country and how extreme the pro-choice movement has become, that frankly, Democrats are afraid to step in and say, well, you know, this seems reasonable to me. They can't do that anymore.
Well, this is certainly one of those issues out there that if you have friends on the pro-choice side, talk about this issue with them, because this is one, I think you're so right, Lindsay. Most common sense Americans, decent Americans, look at this and say, this is horrific that we allow this in this country. This is one of those things we ought to be able to come together on. All right, both sides, both Democrats and Republicans, also spoke out on the gun debate this week following Las Vegas. Take a look at these clips.
Imagine how much worse last night's shooting could have been if the gunman had a silencer. Imagine the confusion for first responders if they arrived on the scene to a bunch of civilians wielding their own guns, attempting to return fire. Imagine the gun lobby's version of society. Everyone armed, everyone out for themselves, everyone at risk all of the time.
To promote some kind of gun control, I think, is the wrong way to approach this. And frankly, what I experienced was when there was a shooter, luckily we had Capitol Police there with their own guns. Every single day in America, regular citizens that just have a passionate belief in the Second Amendment, that have their own guns, use guns every single day to protect themselves against criminals. And those stories never get told, or hardly ever get told.
I know there are a lot of people who say we shouldn't politicize death. You know, for me, God forbid if anything happened to me, I'm telling all you ladies, I want you to politicize it forever. Go ahead and politicize it.
Unfortunately, now a very politically charged thing. And I find it interesting that this is a big meme that started on the left, is attacking people said, oh, I'm praying for the victims of Las Vegas, as if this is some monstrous thing that you're praying for the victims.
Well, that's not enough.
That's not enough. Prayers are not enough.
Because we can all do more than God can, apparently.
Right. We can all do more than God can. We need the government to step in and do all these things for us and stop any gun violence from ever happening again. I think this became, frankly, it's quite shocking to hear people saying this, that they would outright attack people, say we should pray for the victims. And there is a huge gap in how a lot of people on the left and right see this issue. People on the left attack those on the right. They think, why aren't you using the government to do all these things and protect us from firearms and protect us from danger? People on the right say, we live in a fallen world. You know, of course we want to protect people, but depriving people of their God-given rights, their ability to defend themselves, their self-defense, that's not something we want to do. We just don't believe that all these proposals are actually going to stop mass violence.
Yeah, I think, Lindsay, this really showed a fissure, not just in, we've always had different views on gun rights.
Totally.
We've had debate for a long time, but this really showed a different angle, which is what you're getting to, Jared, on this kind of different world view.
Exactly.
I don't think anybody's saying our thoughts and prayers are with you. You're saying that's all we should do.
Exactly.
It's just pray and then walk away. That's not even what the Bible teaches.
Right, exactly.
Right? Faith and works, it all goes together. But I really feel like the left kind of, they all jumped on this bandwagon.
And I've actually been seeing it for the past couple of months, especially after a lot of natural disasters. But what's really ironic is that after any kind of terrorism in Europe, you'd see people on the left saying thoughts and prayers are with France, or they change their avatar to a picture of the Eiffel Tower, or what have you. So they're okay with thoughts and prayers when it's Islamic terrorism. They're not okay with thoughts and prayers when they think that we need to take all the guns away from people in this country. That seems to be where they draw the line.
And on the issue of, what should you do? That's kind of their big thing.
Something.
I think, look, we talked about this at the beginning of the show. What should you do? You should be like the heroic good people who, when there was something terrible happening, that they sprung into action. They risked their lives. That's a matter of good people stopping the actions of the bad. And if we live in a fallen world where we know there will always be evil people, there will always be people like ISIS, ideologues, radicals that want to kill others, it's up to good people to step in and say, we're going to do something right now, right here, and we're going to save lives.
And we outnumber them.
And we outnumber them.
The bad people.
The evil people, frankly, are outnumbered by the good people, and that is our defense against these monstrous acts.
Well, and it's a very good point, and we started the show with some of the heroes that came out of this act, and we're going to finalize our show here with one of the victims of, I really hate to call them victims, but one of those who was hurt in the Las Vegas shooting, and his response when President Trump came to the hospital to greet him in his room.
visitor.
Thomas, how are you? No, don't get up, don't get up. How are you? Feeling okay? Harry, get up.
Where's this thing at? Good time. Good time. This guy looks tough to me. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. How's it going?
So, Lindsay, the president got a warm welcome, I saw, from everybody that we saw him
Yes.
going in to greet, but this was really cool to see this guy stand up.
It was so awesome. When I saw it, I saw it going around on Twitter all, yesterday, and it was just, he just got shot, and he was standing, because that's the level of respect he had for the office of the president and for the country. And I think it's wonderful. I mean, I think it's great to see that kind of display, but it's also, I would hope that people would have done the same thing if it had been President Obama, if it had been any other president. I really love seeing these examples of people who actually have respect for the office, no matter what their political background is.
I think that was something that I was taught growing up from my parents.
Right.
That said, this is the president. It doesn't matter if you don't like him, whoever it is. You respect the office. You respect what the presidency is. This is, the office created for the American people, and you stand up and respect him and shake his hand. And that's I think, a very good thing in this country, no matter who it is. If you don't like the guy, that's fine. You don't have to like them personally.
Yeah.
Some people don't like Trump. But stand for the man and respect the office and respect the American people, this office that we've created for us, our constitutional
That's really what it comes down to.
Well,
It's respect for the American people.
It's great to see the American people, average American citizens, doing the right thing, which is not make everything a political event, which is what Hollywood and so much of Washington wants them to do.
So sad.
Thank you guys very much for being with us.
You're welcome. Always so much fun.
Always a fun group. And thank you guys for joining us. Well, we'll be back here next week for the next week's Top 10 Countdown. In the meantime, we hope you enjoy your weekend, and thanks for joining us. Have a good one.
Thank you.